Hey, y'all. We are back. Welcome to Making Leader Moves. My name is Giovanna Rosales, your host here at Making Leader Moves, and I am so excited to be here with you all. Welcome to season 3. This is a very important season and a personal one for me. We will be diving deep with other mujeres to speak on their journeys of discovering an extra layer of themselves, they're chronic, whether it's illnesses, disabilities, and or disorders. I do want to make a disclaimer out here. Neither our guest Victoria nor myself are medical professionals. We are just having a conversation on how we personally manage our disorders, chronic conditions, and or disabilities. Please seek medical and professional help if you do not feel well, or if you feel that you yourself have a medical condition. On today's show, we are going to talk and touch upon ADHD con mi amiga Victoria Carrington, who is a creative director and founder of Lilac and Aspen, where she is able to amplify others' missions and values by sharing their authentic stories in creative ways. From social media content creation to graphic design to websites, Victoria is with nonprofit and grassroots organizations, over 15 years of graphic design experience, being a local social media influencer. This educator turned entrepreneur is a powerhouse. Victoria's mission of working with other women of color to make sure they are seen, heard, and living their best business lives is fuego for real. Hola, mi amiga, and welcome to Making Leader Moves. I am so excited to have you on the show. I know I spilled the tea on who you are professionally, but I'm so excited to just deep dive and get into it on speaking about your journey with being diagnosed with ADHD. But before diving in, let's touch on how your journey started, how it has been. And I guess with the first question, it's going to be kind of like when you were growing up, how did you feel internally? Did you feel there was always something different with you? Did you have a hard time in school? What was, or was it hard to fit into the quote unquote norm? And again,
Yeah.
please feel free to introduce yourself a little because we're so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutamente. Like, tengo muy emocionada. Like, I'm super excited to be here as well. Like, what an honor. And, like, thank you for, muchas gracias para la oportunidad. So, the chance to, like, talk about one, like, who I am as an entrepreneur, but also, like, to talk about ADHD. Because, first off, I don't feel like it's something we talk about a lot.
Agreed.
And that's why, like, when I saw like what you were doing for season 3, I was like, yes, like Giovanna, like yes, sí, vamos, because I always feel like too, like in our comunidad, we don't always talk about these things, and then access and advocacy, advocating for ourselves is like really important, and so like I'm just thrilled to be here. And I mean that really like covers it. Like the intro was perfect. I mean, one of the things that I love is that I'm a creative entrepreneur. That high school art teacher that was like, you should pick a different career because your art isn't that good to be a career. Like, haha, got the last laugh now, as I'm running this like thriving creative business where
Yes.
I get to use my creative skills to like uplift and amplify other people's stories and voices, but also like cheerlead and uplift other people as well. Like I have this nickname in my comunidad, like that I'm a wildfire. And I love that because I just get to kind of like set the spark for a lot of things.
Oh,
And,
love it.
we need these sparks. We need these spaces of change. So like shifting into like ADHD, like first off, like I growing up like so I'm from Boulder, Colorado, which
Okay.
is a very predominantly upper middle class white town in the
Hmm.
suburbs. And so like I'm Dene, I'm black, and I'm Mexicana. So like I felt different anyway. So
For
it was
sure.
always hard to kind of detect if there was anything really specifically different in terms of maybe the way that I behave socially.
Right.
But what I did start to really think about, and I've learned more about it as I've gone on this journey with ADHD because I'm a late diagnosis. I just got officially diagnosed 3 months ago,
Oh
meaning
my
that
goodness.
I've gone, almost 40 years.
Yeah.
um, without some of the medical supports, some
Hmm.
that are in my life now super transformative. And
Hmm.
so when I was a kid, like I definitely didn't necessarily have that chance. Like ADHD was something, and I think that we as society still can sometimes have those bias, right? We hear ADHD and we like close our eyes and we like have a picture of what it looks like and
Correct.
who it happens to. And it's usually, hyper middle school white boys.
Absolutely.
And
And I literally, that's what I thought about. Yeah,
yeah,
you're absolutely right.
and like that's not, like that's part of why I like love talking about my journey, because I
Hmm.
get to like, by we know representation matters, and I get to like show up and be like, no, here's like another voice, here's another picture of what it could look like. But what I will say, when I was a kid, like first off, I love school, I love learning, but I did notice that there were certain parts that if I wasn't interested in the subject, which is really common with ADHD. Like if you're interested in something and it's like a special interest thing, you're like, yes, I will. I stayed up all night. Then the night threads dropped with all the other ADHDers who were like, this is so cool. Like let's have a threads party. But if it's not something I'm interested in, it's really, really hard to get motivated. It's really hard
Hmm.
to start.
Hmm.
So like for me, math was something I just wasn't interested in. I could do it, I just wasn't interested in it.
Got it.
And that's where I started to really maybe notice that something, like looking back, something was different.
Hmm.
I was really fortunate enough to grow up in privilege, and that my parents were able to pay for tutors
Hmm.
for math for certain things. But when I look back, it wasn't necessarily about like I needed the help. It's just that I was so unmotivated to do it because it wasn't interesting to me.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I also want to give you a shout out with something that you had said in the beginning was, my counselor had said, your artwork ain't all that, girl. Like, go learn the math because this ain't it. I feel like a lot of women of color or people of color get those type of guidance counselors, get those type of um I think some other schools have different terms for them, but you're not the first person who's told me that. I know you won't be the last. And so I want to give you a shout out and I want to let all of our listeners know, whether it's yourself, whether it's your children, whether it's your nieces or nephews, like just because they have the title counselor, that don't mean shit. Like they don't know you the way you
100%.
know you. You know you. And so I want to commend you for being like, that's cute. That's fine. That's only your opinion. I know me and I'm gonna make it happen for myself and I'm gonna thrive and I'll figure out how I'm gonna get there. So if you get discouraged by a counselor, like please don't. Again, it's only an opinion. You know you, so you fight for what you want at that time. And I say at that time because who I was in college, like a senior in high school, freshman in college, is totally different than who I am now. So please don't let
Absolutely.
anyone don't let anyone take away your path and your journey and your experiences because this is your life and you are allowed to live it to the fullest and how you feel and you see fit. So I just want to put that out there. Um,
Absolutamente. Like I'm snapping, I'm doing the 100%, because like, and I think that that's where so much of my fire like comes from, of
Love it.
just having spent years hiding my art in a closet because of this person's opinion. And now
Mhm.
like, like I'm shipping some of my art off to be in a gallery in another state. Um
Can you repeat that again just for the people in the back, please?
yeah, so I'm
Yes.
shipping my art off to go be featured in a gallery in another state, and then I'm being paid and flown out there to speak about my art. So I just want to say, yeah, like I've made it as an artist, and this is just the beginning. And so, that journey is so key and so important. And I mean, and that's why we do these things. Like I was just talking to before we were talking about the Latinas,
Mhm.
these little BIPOC, they're tweens, and they were middle school girls, and they asked me to come and talk to them about confidence. And we got to talk about how it's imperfect, right? Like I've
Yes.
had bouts in my career where I have felt less than, or I haven't felt confident, or I really have let the opinions of other people make decisions for me. But I tell you, once you reach that point that you're like, nope, I'm living for me. I'm living, like my Instagram is Wild and Lee, because it's a play on wild and free. My middle name is Lee.
Love it.
because I'm living wild and free. Like I am living, my truth and my happiness, and like I don't want anybody to get in the way of that, myself
Mhm.
included. And
Yes.
I want to like encourage other Latinas in that. And you know, getting diagnosed and like kind of advocating for myself like in shifting that, cuz I really had a hard time. Like they
Mhm.
really thought I just had really bad anxiety. That if
Right.
I could just figure out how to not be anxious,
Hmm.
then it would solve all of my problems. And so I've gone through this journey of like, talking to doctors or like having therapists be like, you don't really fit the bill for ADHD. And then like having the therapist that I have now that was like, you check all of the boxes.
Right. Right.
So I want to put that out there too is like
Yeah.
once you're like, this is what I need to make me happy, like fight for it, go for it, advocate for it, and you'll find your comunidad. Like that's truly what I found is I found my comunidad. I found people that like saw me, that support me, and they're still there. So
Ah, love it. Love it. So we talk about peers. We talked about how you spoke to these tweens yesterday. We talked about, right, how math wasn't, it just wasn't it. It wasn't popping for you because you were very uninterested in it. What made you decide to go get tested to see what made you different from your peers, colleagues, friends, etc.? What was that point that you were like, okay, I'm done thinking that I'm different. I'm done being told that I'm different. Like, what was the chispa? What was the spark that said, all right, let's go get this test done at this point?
oh, the chispa. I mean, really, so as a social media content creator, I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time on social media and I started seeing these TikToks that were just dropping about ADHD. And I was like, people were really making these relatable stories. And that's one of the main reasons why I believe in the power of story. I always have, as from the time of childhood, and like, even what I do in my business is it's you know harnessing the power of an authentic true story. So I
Mhm.
started seeing these people on social media share their stories and share their experiences, and I started connecting and I started relating, and I started really asking myself like, so I'm still having some of these troubles. Like, so for me, one of the biggest pieces that was like maybe I'm different is that I could not go to the grocery store. And I know that sounds so básico, like,
Mhm.
but and
I mean,
especially
they have whole memes about Target runs, right? So you're like, why?
right.
Where like FOMO because I can't do that. Like I can't participate in this basic bitch life status, but there has to be something there. Yeah. So please,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
And then like I'm telling my therapist about this. Like I'm literally sitting in therapy, and this was like a couple years ago where I'm sitting in therapy and I'm talking about how I have a hard time going to the grocery store. And
Mhm.
this is like a little bit post COVID, and she's like, just order your groceries. And then I was like, okay, I have a hard time ordering my groceries. And it was still a time when people were using that the delivery and the app service really well. So like it would be like a like 2-3 days waiting. So like I would be like, okay, cool. I'd open my fridge, I'd have no food. I'd be like, okay. And I start getting this panic, like I gotta go to the grocery store. And I was like, I can't do that. That's so overwhelming and scary. And then I was like, cool, I'll get on the app and I'll order food. And then it was like, no, they have like 2 days. And then I was like, cool, so I'm just gonna go eat out. But then like I didn't
Mhm.
really have the budget or the financial means at that moment to go constantly eat out. So then
Mhm.
but I gotta eat, right? So then I
Right.
eat out, and then I'm sitting there and I'm feeling shitty about myself because I just did not go to the grocery store. I just ate out, like, and I'm thinking like, what is wrong with me? Like,
Mhm.
and then they just were like, here's some anti-anxiety meds, right? So take these meds, they're gonna calm you down, and they're gonna
Mhm.
just help you go to the grocery store. And the same shit was still happening. I just was like calmer while it was happening. Like I just was like, okay, this
Mhm.
is cool, but I still wasn't going to the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you walk our listeners and our viewers through that? Like, what made you feel that you couldn't go to the grocery? Like, what is that process for you?
Yeah. So, what I started to really understand the more that I became educated about ADHD is that there's a couple of things that can happen.
Mhm.
One is that, your executive function in your brain is different. That's why they
Mhm.
call it neurodiverse.
Mhm.
I love the term neurospicy because I've always felt a little spicy. I am here for the sazon. And so I love like now I'm like, yeah, I'm neurospicy, y'all.
Love
But
it.
it just means that my brain is going to look at a básico task, right? Very different than someone who doesn't have ADHD.
Hmm.
Repetitive tasks are really challenging.
Okay.
And then to the same degree, something that might seem challenging is very easy.
Okay.
So, for example, at the same time that I'm like, I can't go to the grocery store, I'm building websites. I'm coding websites. Like, I taught myself how to code and build websites.
Wow.
Like, just because I like, and I was like, oh, I just watched some YouTube. And like, I totally felt like Elle Woods sometimes, where, that question of like, oh, you got into Harvard Law. And she's like, what? Like, it's hard. Like, that's the other side of ADHD that's like awesome. But
Yeah.
it comes at a price. And that price was, me being like, oh my gosh, how am I going to function? So first off, the executive function is off.
Yeah.
And a lot of times to like rev it up, spice it up, you crave dopamine. And
Hmm.
so that's really common with like ADHD people to like chase after, dopamine things,
Mm.
things that give you dopamine. Shopping, good food, relationships, these things that I was also like, okay, well, I just dropped like $200 at TJ Maxx. I feel
Yeah.
awesome. I'm a Maxinista. This scented candle solved my problems for like 10 minutes. But now what? Like, I still didn't do my laundry. I still did not do my dishes, but I have a scented candle, y'all. Like, so that, like, those things were indicating to me that maybe I view and like think differently about the world, because I had friends who would tell me opposite. They'd be
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you're you're struggling to like get your laundry done. Maybe like do this or do that." And I
Yeah.
was like, "I'm just going to go be a Maxinista."
Yeah.
Like, sorry TJ Maxx, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but like thank you for your
Yeah. So was that the key factor of my colleagues, my peers, the students, everyone around me can do, as you were saying, basic tasks, right? Like they have their little list, they go to the targets, they go to the grocery stores, they're able to make it pop, like they're popping, right? Having a good
Mhm.
time. And you're just like, this is too much for me. I can't handle that. Was that the trigger for it?
Yeah, and I
And
mean,
then as you were saying, you were watching influencers too.
I was
Um,
yep.
mhm.
Yeah, where the real trigger was is I started getting super burnt out. And so that's like the other
Mm,
piece. And there's this influencer that I really like on LinkedIn, LA
mhm.
Middleton, who, talks a lot about she has a newsletter called Unmasked, and she talks a lot about how if you have neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, you're trying to constantly function in a world that isn't designed for your brain. And
Mm,
so she was like starting to call out like some of these things, like for example, a work meeting. Well, if there's no agenda, if there's no timeline, like I would get wicked anxious. Like I get wicked anxious if I don't know like how long this meeting is going to take, what we're going to talk about, those sort of
mhm,
things.
mhm.
But at the time I was in an employment situation where I didn't like I had to mask all of that because it's like I need this job. I got to like hide all the ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I'm like sitting there and I'm trying really hard to concentrate and I'm not given the tools to focus.
Mm,
And then I'm burnt out. And then I'm burnt out and I feel bad about myself. And that feeling bad about myself led me to feeling so bad about myself that I had suicidal thoughts,
right.
between all the anxiety, the stress, like the constant beating myself up because I'm like, why am I making these decisions? Like, why am I still spending all this money that I don't have? And then I have to go to work and then I'm like forcing myself into this box. And like, I would come home, Ivana, every Friday night for months and just lay in my bed under my weighted blanket and cry
Mm,
and just not want to live.
mhm,
And
mhm.
that's when I like finally started advocating for myself even harder. That's when the wildfire, the spark like kicked in, like mountain cat energy was like going to my doctor, going to my therapist and saying, I don't think me just being on this treatment that I've been on for almost 2 years for depression and anxiety is working.
Mm,
Something is missing and y'all need to find it because I'm literally dying.
Yeah. I mean, suicidal ideation, right? Like that, like you said, like that was one of your triggers. That was one of your like super warnings of that I'm not here. And and I feel like that seems to be the common thread within this season, season 3, of just talking about whether it's the disorders, the chronic illnesses, or the disabilities, is the resilience of having to fight and advocate for yourself. I just had a guest on. She talked about how she 7 years, it took 7 years to be diagnosed, you know, with me. And I'm going to have an episode talking about my journey. It took me 20 years to get
Yeah.
diagnosed. And so the fact that you were resilient enough, brave enough, had the chispa, right, had the spark, the wildfire to be like, y'all aren't getting this shit right, and I need you to get your shit together, because the ideation is going to become attempts very soon.
Yeah.
So I applaud you for that. I applaud you for knowing that you deserved better, and loving yourself enough and being like, this is tough as shit. It's actually hell, but I deserve to be here, and I deserve to find a solution
Mm-hmm.
to what I have. And in order to get to that solution, I need to get a diagnosis first, and the correct one. I know it's not anxiety. I know it's not depression. It's more. And
Mm-hmm.
so let's all work as a team and figure this shit out, therapist and doctor. So I love you for that, and I commend you for that. And I just want our listeners to know that, you know, if you're in the process of this, or you're just starting off on your journey, like, please do not rely on the first or even like the second, you know, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a therapist, whether it's just talking to your
Mm-hmm.
colleagues. Like, sometimes it does take years. Again, mine took 20, someone
Mm-hmm.
else's took 7, yours took 2. It just, it's no timeline. But like, and I say this a lot, you know, you know your
Mm-hmm.
body, you know your brain, you know when you're good, you know when you're not so good. And so just having that strength is amazing, and I love that for you. And I just want to give all of our listeners and our viewers courage to not give up hope and fight for yourself, because you deserve to be here and you deserve to be happy. And yeah, and like just finding great support groups, and great doctors and therapists along the way is amazing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so now that we know, right, that you have ADHD, right? So after the 2 years, they come to the diagnosis. You're like, yep, that sounds about right. In the meantime, you're having this like business that's thriving, and you know, as an entrepreneur, not only are you your zone of genius, which is social media and websites and coding, it's everything else in between, right? It's the accountant, it's the HR, it's the, can go on and on. We can go on and on. And that is exhausting, right? That alone itself creates burnout. But what I want to know is, how do you navigate your ADHD with being a thriving business owner? How does that look for you?
You ask for help and let go of judgments, which I'm still practicing. Like, this is like, don't, like, I'm not up here like I haven't figured out. This is me just being like, that's the advice. And I constantly have to remind myself to take my own advice sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But like, and I like want to back up and give that super shout out too. That's one of the reasons why I love social media and why I've become so vulnerable and shared so much of myself on it, is because I found it saved my life. Because I started, my best friend would send me these like Instagram reels and be like, this is what you need to tell your doctor. These are the things happening to you. And so once I got that diagnosis, and my therapist was converted well before my medical doctor, which is like a whole thing in itself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I have, some feelings about that, in the sense of, like, one, you know as a woman of color, and ADHD is just one of the many strings of, like, I have endometriosis, I've gone through Lyme, and like there had been so many times in my past, like when I finally got treated for Lyme, I was in a wheelchair. So
Mm-hmm.
like they let it go so long that I was literally, being crippled. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to say that super loud for like the women of color in the back, because we know that some of us, or like many women of color, die before they get some of the correct diagnosis. And that's a problem. And we need to continue to advocate and change that. That, because I shouldn't have to spend months trying to convince my doctor as I'm suicidal, as I'm like in crippling anxiety that I can't function, to help maybe try put me on a different med that could change my life. Because that same woman, like I can tell you, I have not thought about suicide once since I have started my ADHD meds.
Wow.
Two, I go to the grocery store now. Like and they talked about that. They were like really like we're concerned to put you on like Adderall because, and I'm like, "No, I don't know. What do you mean?"
Exactly.
And I'm like,
Exactly.
"Listen, I'm not here to try to find Adderall to like stay up all night and do like college party things. I'm literally here so I can go to the damn grocery store, so I can do my bicycle bitch things and like live."
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember looking at my doctor and I was like, listen, if I really wanted Adderall, you think I'd be sitting here in your office, like trying to like fill out these paperwork that I don't like paperwork, like to like get this help. And that's why like I really really want to push like fight, like get your community, get your like I had my my best friend, I swear, like if I was like, hey, can you come hold a sign up like outside my doctor's office and be like, give this girl meds, like she would. Like
Yeah.
the community is so important because we hear these stories of like women of color like dying from childbirth complications,
Mhm.
dying from these things, suffering in silence.
Mhm.
I was like, I'm so grateful that I was able to share with some people what was going on, and they didn't let me be alone.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like, first off, Giovanna, gracias for having
Mm.
and bringing these topics to life, because for us as Latinas, like it really can be a life or death situation. For maybe somebody else, it's like, oh, that's cute, you have ADHD. It's like, no, like if I didn't get that support, I might not have made it.
Yeah.
So I just want to like mic drop that for a second before I
Oh.
talk about that. Like I just, um,
No, no, and I appreciate it, and that's like, and that's something else. Like, I'm really glad that you raised awareness to that because that's fucked up. The doctor was the one who diagnosed you, right? Like, obviously, with your help, with your aid, with the guidance of your therapist, and like you being like, no, like this isn't working. But then when they finally give you the right diagnosis, it's like, but wait a minute, you're a woman and you're a woman of color. We don't know if we should give you Adderall. Like, how many people do we know that are just, I mean, I know a few, right, that are just like, "Oh yeah, we just go online," or like it's being mailed to us or it's being hand delivered, and then all of a sudden the person who actually needs it in order to function, like you were saying, you probably wouldn't even be here with us if it wasn't for you fighting. How fucked up is that? But giving us hope and being like, you know what, y'all, listen, you know what, listeners, like, fight until you fucking get your meds, and until you get the correct meds, because the first time you fought, they didn't give you the correct meds, right? I mean, they gave you meds, they gave
yeah,
you the antidepressants and
mhm,
then the anxiety pills, but that's not what you needed. What you needed was Adderall, and all of a sudden, these doctors are like, "But do you though?" And it goes back to, and we know it statistically, women of color can tolerate pain, right? Or women of color, they just don't know what the hell they're talking about because están locas, right? Like they don't need that. They're
yeah,
good, they're strong, they can handle pain.
yeah,
No, it's so much more than that.
yeah,
And we, again, it's, we are worthy of care. We are worthy to be here. So
absolutely.
I'm really excited that you, again, that you shouted yourself out and literally told the doctor, like, bro, at this point, if I'm not here, it's gonna be because of you. So give
Yeah,
me the Adderall now. Like,
yeah, yeah, which I love that because, like, yeah, you're right. A lot of times we're, especially as Latinas, we're being muy dramáticas, like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, and really, it's like no, and like, I really appreciate like my therapist at that time. My therapist was like, because my therapist is a behavioral therapist, like she's
Mm,
not somebody who can necessarily give meds. She was like, I'm writing letters. Like she was like, I'm writing letters because like I study this. I've been your therapist for years. Like
yeah.
you just need the meds. And then I remember like going back a month later and telling that same doctor after they reluctantly, hesitantly were like, I guess we'll try the meds. Like, we're gonna like watch you like a hawk and make sure you're okay. And I was like,
Fucking
I went to
ridiculous.
the grocery store on a Sunday and I cried in there because I said, I feel normal. For
Mm,
the first time, I feel normal. And I said, that's all I was really trying to do is like get a base
mhm,
because I have been I'm really proud of myself in that I've been successful in
Mm-hmm.
spite of being undiagnosed all these years, but
Mm-hmm.
like it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of like connecting to the question of like how to run a successful business is like, one, now I have this base, but two, I can now ask for help and
Right.
not make judgments. And I can kind of explore what it looks like for me. Like my home studio, like my home office, like I have all these like paper and like sticky notes and it looks like really wild, but like that's how I make my to-do lists. I have like,
Nice.
a number of different apps. I finally just got on like one calendar. Um and I think asking for help and like, knowing, so with ADHD there's this like term that I learned from, the social media, and I really loved it. I stuck to it, of like it's a goblin task, which is just like it's that gross task that you're just like, oh no, like I just think of like cochina, like, just like on Poco or something. They're just like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so like a goblin task is just something that is just really hard to do. You don't want to do it. You will absolutely put it off until like you absolutely have to do it. Like for me, it's the dishes. For me, it's laundry.
Mm,
And like we have to do these things. Like taking
yeah.
care of your home is a part, and like having a nice, warm, clean space
Mm-hmm.
is something we all deserve. And so I remember the first time that I hired out a fold and wash service, and my
Mm-hmm.
mommy was like, what? Because that's the other piece, right? Like
Yeah.
as Latinas, like we were not taught that we do this. Like so many of
You do
us,
it
like,
all. Are you like what? You're asking what?
no,
Yeah, you
especially when it comes to
do it all.
household things, like what? No, you don't have somebody else clean your house. Like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
like
you clean your house so your mom can come in, expect inspect it, and then talk mad shit. But like side shit,
right,
right? It's not direct, son indirectas, right?
right,
It's indirecta shit talking.
right,
Yeah, like, oh, you don't want that? You want a service to do that?
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I have a cleaning lady. I have a lady that comes and cleans my house,
Love it.
like
Love it.
like but I was and it's actually, she's my bestie, and we were talking this morning about it, and something I realized is that having those services
Mhm.
aren't like bougie. They're not luxury. They're not me trying to be like, "Oh, look at how extra I'm being." They're part of my self-care and my maintenance,
Mm,
because and it was so hard to ask for the help, one,
of course.
and then two, to believe that I deserved the help, because like
Mhm.
think of our, our familia, like our vibe, like, like I didn't come all this way, or like,
Yeah.
travel and go through all I did, like, we work hard, we work muy duros, like, and
Yeah.
so
Be orgullosa of your home, right? And to be orgullosa means that you have to do it, right?
right,
Quote unquote, you have to do it. But we no, that's
right.
not at all what it means.
Right. And
Yeah.
so much of that anxiety and that depression, so much of the anxiety is this paralysis of just like, oh my gosh, my brain is so overstimulated with
Mhm.
how am I going to do all these things? And then it takes so much energy to do these goblin, basic, boring tasks
Mhm.
that, other people like can do without the extra thought. And then I'm really burnt out and I'm really tired. And then I start to feel overwhelmed and hopeless, and then that leads me to that like cycle of the depression and the anxiety. And so it's, to me, having somebody come and help clean my house, having, somebody do my laundry, which is really great, because like then it's not like on my floor, which I when I started to talk to my mommy about my diagnosis, what I loved, and something too important to note, is that I love that she was like, "Yeah, I always knew something was there, Mija, but I just didn't know what." And like, I didn't come at it from a way of like, "Oh my gosh, like, how did you?" I realized that so much for our comunidad, like, and especially like as we talk about, you know, accessibility with care, like sometimes it's hard for our families to know the questions or ask the right questions, or to feel like they'll be supported if they ask that, right? Because like
Mhm.
sometimes, like, think about how much judgment I got in just being like, I need these meds. Like, and I was just picturing my mommy back in the day, you know, maybe being afraid that they would try to take me away from her or something,
Oh, of
which
course.
sounds like so like what? But then you also realize that is the truth for our comunidad. And some
That
people,
is very true. Trust me. In my family, we've had that scare too of like, should we even tell los doctores because DCFS can come real quick.
right?
And again, right? That's fucked up that we have to think like that. But your mom at that point did the best
100%.
that she thought she could do with the knowledge that she had at that time. So, and I
100%.
commend you for not being like, "Mom, como me," like, like being upset with her,
No.
but coming more from a loving and compassionate point of view and just telling her like, "Girl, at the end of the day, you had my back. I love you. You did the
Yeah.
best that you could." And that's kind of, a lot of us are going through that with our parents, right? It's like, damn, you kind of dropped the ball on something huge here, but I still love you and we
Mhm.
can move forward. And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet you now that you have a diagnosis and now that you and your mother can openly talk about it, the relationship that you have with her is a complete 180 because now you can tell her, like, Mom, this is the way I function, this is the way I am, setting these boundaries with her because you're also educating her and letting her know this is what works for me and this is what doesn't. Please don't
Mhm.
take it personal. This is just how my brain works.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually getting, like, teary-eyed because my mommy is so supportive and, like,
Mm,
so, like,
mm,
understands a lot more, and so, like, kind of, looping in the cleaning thing, like, I used to never be able like, I have a hard time, like, picking up my clothes, like,
mhm,
my floor is, like, my closet,
mhm,
and when I started to talk to her about ADHD, when I started to talk to her about, like, "Oh, I have this, like, support of, like, going and getting my laundry done," and they, like, fold it for you, like, and
yeah,
all I have to do is, like, put it, away
in the drawers, yeah.
in the drawers, like, I'm, like, sitting there, like, crying, and my mommy's crying with me, and she's like, "I'm so happy for you, mija, like, I'm so proud
Mm,
of you, I'm so proud of that you found something that works for you." Um, and I think that that's it, like, what I realized and, like, what you said and, so much in each generation we have this where we're wanting, and our parents want us to be better, they want us to have better lives than they had, and as we start to explore that and what that means, they get to celebrate those things with us. And I mean, like, that's how I knew something was different, because when you start celebrating the fact that, like, you can put your clothes away and, like, have a clean house and,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
go to the grocery store on a Sunday when everybody else is there, like.
I know that's right. Everyone's waiting for the Sunday scaries is very real. And you're out here dominating Sunday scaries. Like, watch out,
Right?
y'all. Victoria's in the house. Like, that's real shit.
But it also
That's
helps
real
her
progress.
heal
Yeah.
and not feel like she I can really show her that she did a great job
Love
and
it.
that she did the best that she could. Because
Mhm,
sometimes when we have these gaps, especially, like, in care when it comes to, like, mental health, like, she might not have known what was going on
mhm,
and then might not have known how to help me,
mhm.
but, like, it's just grateful that I have the help,
Oh,
and it just takes that pressure off of her, right?
yeah.
And, like, we get to, like, be free and celebrate together and, like, you know,
Mm,
I get to, celebrate these victories and these wins, and I know I didn't talk a ton about business stuff, but it's all the same thing, if it's something like emails, if it's something like, spreadsheets, like, I gotta, outsource that because I'm like, I'm not down with spreadsheets.
yeah, yeah. But that's great because you know that that's not you. You don't want to go down the rabbit hole of being overly stimulated, all of a sudden getting anxious, all of a sudden get depressed. The fact that so it just puts you in more of a negative spiral into the black hole. And you're like, you know what? No, I love me more. I deserve more. So I'm going to go ahead and outsource that shit so I can go ahead, be creative, be in my zone of genius, love me, do all this amazing work, and then have someone else who's an expert take care of that shit. And like you said, we're so scared to ask for help, or we're almost ingrained to think like we can do it all, especialmente como mujeres, especially
Mhm.
like women, like, oh, we can do it all. And then, and then on top of that, if you're the oldest daughter or the only daughter within that immediate family, like, yo, that shit's times 1,000. Trust me, I know. uh,
Sí, es la
but it's
verdad.
just like, you know what? I don't fucking want to, or like I just can't. Like that's not the way my brain works. So I'm like so happy for you and I'm so ecstatic for you that you have an amazing relationship. I mean, you had an amazing relationship with your mom before you
Mhm,
got diagnosed, but now the fact that it's turned into something it's bloomed into something even more fantastic, more marvelous, more great. It's just that fills up my heart and it fills up my cup because it can go either one of two ways, right? It's either
mhm,
they're going to support it or as in my case, it was kind of like brushed under the rug. It was actually very dismissed in the beginning. We've come a long way. It's fine now, but I'm
mhm,
glad that you were able to have an amazing experience. So you talked to us about what you have to do, right? Like you outsource your spreadsheets, you outsource your cleaning services, you have different sticky notes around. Are there any other tips and tricks that you might be able to give our listeners who
yeah,
either know that they're diagnosed with ADHD or think or might be on the road of like, hey, this sounds kind of like who I am.
mhm,
I may not have the means or the funds right now to
mhm,
outsource things. Like I said, I know you talked about sticky notes that you can do that
mhm.
isn't outsourced. Is there anything else that you do personally that isn't outsourced that might be able to help our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then again, just super disclaimer, this is just us talking.
Yeah.
This is not medical or professional advice whatsoever. This is just two mujeres having a conversation on ADHD.
Claro, claro. Well, and I think that in that
Mhm,
lens, part of it is finding like what is going to work for you, what feels
mhm,
good, because that's like the overall disclaimer is that what works for maybe one ADHD person or neurospicy person might not work for another neurospicy person.
mm, mhm,
Because that's the whole point of the neurospiciness, that it celebrates all the different ways and perspectives that our brains can work, which is really
mhm,
fascinating. So as far as like things that I found, like first off, explore, find what works for you, find the
mhm,
system that works for you. That's like the biggest, suggestion and advice that I can give. And then, and I know you mentioned it in another podcast because I low key listened to some of your podcasts before this, is rest is resistance. And
Ugh,
I think that that is so key, is I bake it into my schedule, because what I was talking about before, like these 40-hour work weeks, like nonstop, like constantly, and then by Friday I'm just like burnt out. And so
mhm,
I learned from that especially as an entrepreneur, like I can make my own schedule. So I bake in rest days. Like I bake in days in my schedule where I'm like, all right, I'm not going to socially interact with people today because I can't, because I need to charge that battery. Or if I know, like usually I have like, I also like do fun. I love alliteration. It's totally the communications marketer in me. Um, but I'll have like Mountain Cap Mondays, and so my Mondays are days that like I'm hitting the week hard. I'm doing all of these things, but I also tend to take Tuesday mornings as light to
oh,
balance that. So I have to look at my schedule and say what's going on here. Or if I'm planning my calendar ahead of time, and I have help in that. I've had help kind of converting it all to one calendar, that I get the big picture, and I can say to myself, "Oh, I have a social event. Maybe I'm not going to be able to be my unmasked self. I might have to, be more focused, which takes a lot of energy. So I need to make sure that I'm planning rest days after this." That's
I
that's
love that. That's
key.
No, you know what? That's actually genius almost because again, right, in our culture, in the Western culture, and then again, being una mujer, like you always got to be productive. And if you're not resting, ¿qué estás haciendo? What are you doing? Like sos vaga, right? Sos floja. You're lazy. Get up, right? Like and I know that this is like a very Latino saying is like there's always something to clean. Right? Grab the mop, there's always something to clean. But no, like you, like we, and the reason why I say rest is resistance is because I read the book Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Trisha Hersey. There's so much power in that,
Mhm,
and we don't realize how much power there is in rest. That's when you are able to recharge your battery. That
mhm,
is when you are able to regain your energy. That
mhm,
is when, whether it's just laying down and closing your eyes, taking a nap, being
mhm,
intentional with that cup of tea and really taking in those,
mhm.
like whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's
Yep.
it's the hour nap, It's being able to find yourself, be grounded, and in
Mhm.
that groundation comes different ideas, comes the creativeness, right? The juices that start flowing because you've taken the time to literally chill the F out and not have that task list that, well, at least for me, it runs in my mind every day, right?
Yep.
Like I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna write what I need to do down, but yet because I have it already ingrained in here. So
Right?
I'm always checking, checking, checking. But when you do take the time to rest, it's like, oh wait, I have this idea, or oh wait, you know what? I had this idea. I'm gonna change it into this, or I know how I can make this idea even better.
Yep.
And I really do agree with you when it comes to the power of rest, the power of, and then rest is really just the power of grounding, and coming back to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read that book as well. And like resting, and that's why I have the sticky notes. Part of the sticky notes
Love it.
is because exactly what you said. Like I'll have a list in my mind and I'm going, and sometimes I just have little blocks of sticky notes. I have one, near my bedside table. I have them in different places in my house, in the kitchen, because then I can like get that idea out, and then
Mhm,
it's not taking up that space. And then it's giving me the permission and the
mhm,
space to like, okay, when I rest, I need to. So, also because ADHD involves a lot of sensory
mhm.
pieces, I have what's called, I call it headphone time. I have these like big pink like headphones, like because I love pink. Like Barbie movie was my vibe. Um,
Yes.
but it's really when I put those on, I'm saying and signaling to my body like we are resting. Sometimes I'll even have to like put on, if I'm resting during the day, I'll put on an eye mask or something, and
Ooh.
I'm just like getting into a sense of sensory deprivation and saying you can rest. And sometimes, and that's, I also like the fact that rest doesn't always look the same. Sometimes I am laying down, other times it's I'm doing headphone time, and
Yes.
it's me just being like, I probably have Karol G or Beyonce somewhere in there bopping, and it's just, I like, don't talk to me. I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to do anything. I just get to simply be in this
Mm,
moment. And
I
I
love
think
that.
that is one of the huge biggest tools that I have to use for my, for my ADHD scheduling. I do have an app that is a visual timer, which is really great because like time is like a weird construct with ADHD, because like, it could take me like 5 hours or it could take me like 5 weeks. I don't know. It just depends on
Or
what
5
my,
minutes,
or
right?
5 minutes.
Like,
Yeah.
I have a girlfriend who can like, same thing, right? When it comes to, like, laundry, it's almost like the end of the world for her, but, like, I ask her to, like, if she can help me out with a proposal, it's done within 5 minutes, and I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so, and I love that because it gently reminds me, that's the other thing is my fellow neurospicy amigues, I like amigues. That's the one that kind of
Amigas.
like feels like everybody. Make sure to take care of yourself. Water, food, like you deserve those breaks. And like we forget, right? And a lot of times I'll keep going and going and going because I'm hyper focused on something. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I didn't eat today. Now I'm like feeling unbalanced. And so having some of those visual timers, not just for like tasks, but also for like, hey, take 15 minutes and eat something.
Mm,
Like
that's a
have
powerful one.
something to drink, right? Like it's just, it's so key because I'm guilty of it too. Like,
I've been
um,
major guilty of it this week. As a matter of fact, I was already thinking about the content that I'm going to post up on LinkedIn next week. And like my first either Monday or Tuesday is going to be like, I sucked this week at eating. I've been eating at 4 p.m. and that's like my first meal. What is it ever other than time blocking? Like, what are you doing to make sure that you get that nutrients? Because it's true when you're in the zone, whether with ADHD, whether you're hyper fixated on it, or for me, it's like I'm in the zone, like I'm
yeah.
here, right? Estoy en mi peak kind of thing. It's like, oh, and then I hear my stomach growling, but I'm like, no, it's okay. I have the comfort cup. Like we can get through it. It's like, no, dude, like listen to your stomach. It's growling for a reason. It's not just like, oh, I'm reminding you that. It's like, no, like get some fucking nutrients in you.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that one. I have to be better on an individual level on trying to figure that out. So if any of the listeners or viewers have other than like putting it on my Google Calendar, because that doesn't work for me, I still tend to be like, oh, I can go ahead and squeeze this meeting in really quick. I don't need to take the hour lunch break. If there's anything else other than a Google Calendar, peeps,
Right.
like please, please, please send it to me. Send me your thoughts or what you do, and I am very open to all of these ideas because I fall into that category and I am with you.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we talked about tips and tricks. When it came time, once you got diagnosed with ADHD, was it hard to tell your comunidad about it? I know you said that your mom was super supportive, your best friend was also super supportive, but was there any, did you have any backlash once you were diagnosed with
Not
ADHD?
not particularly to my knowledge, but I also think some of it is my vibe in that I'm like, okay, cool, like this is who I am, like take it or leave it. Like, I really have worked hard to
Mm,
ensure that the people that I surround myself with in my comunidad like see me, honor me, and respect me, and that I do the same for them. And like that's like super key. So like even if there was any kind of backlash, because like I mean sometimes it can feel like with ADHD, like flojera, like
mm,
perezosa, like that's the word that like always comes to mind for me. Like, oh, you're so lazy, but que perezosa,
mhm.
because you're not doing these things. And if anybody kind of if there was that feedback from anyone in my comunidad, I was like, oh, maybe you're not a part of my comunidad. Cool. Like I'm just gonna keep you at an arm's length because it's already enough work to just like simply exist as a
Yes,
woman, as a mujer, like as
yes,
a woman of color,
yes,
like as a business, like I don't have time. And I think that that was the other piece is I realized I didn't have the time and energy to justify
yeah.
myself or my needs to other people
Mm,
if they were unwilling to hear them in the first place.
mm. That's
So
strong. That's huge. Yeah.
like, because it was almost like going to like I'm gluten free, like I've been gluten free, I'm from Boulder, so it just feels like that means I have to be gluten free. um but
Boulder
like
equals gluten free.
Boulder, Colorado equals gluten free. um but like it was like I'd be going to like these restaurants specifically that only had a gluten menu, and then
Mhm.
I'd be all upset and be like, well, this isn't for me. And
Right.
then somebody was like, well, why do you keep going to the places that aren't for you? So I did the same thing with my community dad of like when I
Ooh.
got diagnosed, I was like, okay, is this a place that's for me? Is this a place that's going to practice some neuro inclusivity? Is
Mm,
this person open to neuro inclusivity? I'm not saying that they have to have the answers. They have to like, you
right.
know, but like just be willing to like listen or understand. And if it wasn't, then I was like, cool, that's like the gluten filled restaurant. It's not for me. Like
I
that's for
love that
somebody else. Like
analogy.
that's
Yeah.
okay, but it's not for me. And so I'm just gonna go find my gluten free utopia.
I love that. I love that analogy. I love that metaphor. I'm gonna start using that shit. And I'm like, oh, is that And it's true. It's true. Because sometimes, and I feel like everyone in general just kind of gets stuck with it, right? Like, oh, like this was my tribe, this is my comunidad, or like this is my familia, so have to back it up, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what. But if it doesn't serve you, is it really necessary to kind of keep on hanging out there and
Mhm.
keep on hanging out with those friends or keep on hanging out at that restaurant, keep on hanging out with those specific family members if you're not getting the support that you need? And that's great. So speaking of support, your comunidad, how do they help support your journey and your experience with ADHD? How do they show up for you?
Yeah, wow. Like I did not expect the feels. Like I'm in my feels, I guess. Like I just feel really grateful and I
Oh,
feel really
welcome to making
blessed.
leader moves.
Okay, cool. They hear me when I might say because a lot of like this is still really new for me. It's
Yes.
been 3 months. And so a lot of times if I'm learning something that I need, um they hear me, they listen, they make those adjustments. So like having agendas. So like for example, having an agenda of a meeting, even if it's a social thing, like I sometimes like I have questions. It usually involves what are we gonna eat? um, and like what's the timeline? Like and I realize that sometimes I'm asking for how long is because I'm asking because I know that I'm gonna have to possibly subject myself to this space where I have to kind of mask up some of my ADHD, and
Mm,
I need to know how long I have to hold that performance until I can like kind of like it's like okay, I got my hair up, how long till I can let it down. But I also see that my comunidad is working to create spaces that I don't have to mask, that I can
mm,
just show
mm,
up as myself. There's this really amazing, couple. They like rented out a whole movie theater for like the Barbie movie, and it was just show up as you are, and like you got to they encouraged dressing up, and so like we dressed up. It was like so fun, and just knowing that there's so many people in my comunidad that are like, how can we want you here? First off, that's what
mm,
they tell me. And I think that's why I get like so nervous because like so much at points in my life, I heard people tell me that they didn't want me, or they didn't want me at
mm.
the table. So first off, my comunidad here in New Hampshire, I just have to like, I just sometimes I'm like pinching myself like when I say that, when I'm like, I found a BIPOC community, I found a queer community that's like vibrant and supportive of like all the sides of me in New Hampshire. Like I didn't know it was here, but it's popping. But first off, they tell me
Shout
that
out to New Hampshire? Question
yeah, like not necessarily. So yeah, don't judge a book by its cover.
For
Like
sure.
apparently in New Hampshire we have, we definitely have this scene, but I'm also, people tell me that I belong and they want me there, and what do they need to do to help get me there? And when I heard people ask me that,
Hmm.
like, and I think that's why it is emotional in those fields because we're not. I don't know about you, but I feel like you probably relate to not always feeling like people ask those questions of us.
Oh, 100%. 100%, 97% of the time. Unless if it is your comunidad, which brings me to my next question, which is how did you find your comunidad? Was it, I mean, obviously, right, you have your best friend, you have your mother, but what were like how else were you able to find, this tribe that you have built for yourself?
It's social media is
Okay.
one, but it's also being brave
Hmm.
and vulnerable in being myself, which I know is very hard. It's not always safe for us as women of color to do that.
Hmm.
So I'm not, necessarily suggesting that everybody do that. But what I found is that for me, there's a difference. There's not a big difference between acting brave and being brave. So when I would like share my stories or when I would, post these TikToks or Instagrams and, I had this job for a while where I was, to travel the state and kind of find things that make New Hampshire interesting. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, where are my communities of color? Where am I going to find my people? And I would just chase those and just show up and be myself and be awkward and weird. And it kind of like I love that it kind of has gone full circle because in the beginning you asked if there were things that I did differently or how did I know, and I've always struggled with social cues.
Hmm.
Um, Now I understand why. Now I understand it's like the ADHD, but like one of the things I got, and I don't know if it's just my personality, if it's ADHD or any of that, but I just sometimes would go up to somebody and I'd say, "Hi, I'm Victoria," and I grew up as an only child, and so I think that I understand what it feels like to feel lonely.
Mm.
So that's really how I went to find people is I go up to them and say, "Hi, I'm Victoria. What's your name? Tell me about you," and also like social cues of like, "Hi, I grew up as an only child with ADHD." Like I don't necessarily know how to talk to people, but here I am. Like let's do it. Like, is it weird? Is it awkward? It's cool because it's super weird and awkward for me, but like, hey, let's go with it. And
But
you
it's
know,
the honest, it's like you were saying, it's the bravery, it's the honesty, it's the I might not know how to do this correctly, but I'm still gonna show up. Like for me with this whole series. I know it's very personal to me because, right, like I myself was diagnosed with a disorder about like 4 months ago as well. But just like trying, like just talking to women about it, like, hi, my name is Giovanna, I have PMDD, and I'm also an entrepreneur, so what's up, let's chat. And it's
Yeah.
true, and it's true, but I think it's I think after the initial like awkwardness, people just, and the right people, right, again, the right people who are going to be part of your tribe are going to appreciate that and be like, all right, well, she just broke the ice. Like, she just laid it all out on the table. What else do we have to lose here?
Mhm.
Because she showed up as her vulnerable self. That means I can show up as my vulnerable self. And we're just going to move this connection forward. And
Yeah.
hopefully it progresses. And if not, that's okay too. And I think that's kind of something that we tend to forget. It's not everyone needs to be part of your tribe, and I like, and that includes family members, and not everyone's going to get it, and even some of your tribe, you know, you have your ride or die tribe members, and then you have your other members that, you know, they're down to support you, but they're not always going to be in the thick of it with you, and that's
Mhm.
okay. You know, as like, I am always like, if you have that one person who's ride or die, you have plenty, because it's really really hard to find those type of people
Mhm.
nowadays. And then everyone else can be the support, you know, and then different members are for different things,
Mhm.
and can hold different types of space for you depending on where you are that
Mhm.
day, that hour, that minute. So yeah, that I just wanted to point that out too, because I think sometimes we think like, oh, we're community, or like, well, and especially, you know, women of color, like, but it's my family, like, you know, and so family's not always going to be supportive, or they're not always going to understand. Maybe it's going to take time for them to understand. Maybe it's going to take time for them to be supportive. In the
Mhm.
meantime, though, it's very important for you to find your tribe. And I, as well, with PMDD, was able to find my tribe through
Mhm.
social media. So
Yep.
through Instagram specifically, because girl, I be like, I'm in my best senora era, and I can't do the TikToks. Maybe, maybe, maybe in the future, no sé. But I'm just like, I'm living my best senora life. I can handle one, well, LinkedIn, and then like the other one is Instagram. Y eso es todo. Like, cannot do anymore.
It's
I'm at capacity.
it's all good. Yeah, like I actually prefer Instagram because I too am in my senora era, and I just like I'm like I mean I definitely can use an array of them, but like Instagram is like where my home, like that's where I'm like, oh, it feels good. That's where, when I take my like, social media weave off, I'm like, okay, I'm on the Instagram, like, you know here's what's up. um so yeah.
I love it. So we talked about tribe, right? We talked about your, you know, you having your support system, tu comunidad. Are there any other resources such as books, websites, or podcasts that you follow that help you learn more and manage your ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like resources and books, I mean, there's so much out there. There's a couple podcasts that I've listened to, but it's really once again just like finding what resonates with you, because what
Mhm,
resonates with me may not resonate with you.
mhm.
But the couple that like stand out that I seem to really appreciate most is Unmasked, Ellie Middleton. You can find them on LinkedIn. Then the two Instagrams, because Senora Era is ADHD Alien, who
Okay.
is an illustrator who has created this like ADHD character that's an alien, and like I just love it. It's so visually pleasing because
Mhm,
I am a creative, and
mhm,
all of these things, like not caring for my ADHD, not caring for my mental, emotional, spiritual, physical well-being, all impact my creativity. So
mhm,
it's always nice when when I see their stuff, because it is this beautiful graphic novel style. It
mhm.
just inspires me. And then the last one is the Psych Doctor MD, because she has the most informative, like, and I love that she's a doctor with ADHD. So she's almost like, hey, I'm literally able to talk about this from so many angles.
Yes.
And she's putting out information that, because that's the other piece of sometimes, viejos are like, oh, you can't, like, that's wrong information. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, well, like, I don't want to talk about where you get your information. But, you know, I love that the Psych Doctor MD, she's literally somebody who's like, I can back this up with science and I can back this up with facts. And I
Love
think
it.
that that's really important, especially to somebody who might be questioning
Hmm.
if they have ADHD, if they need to, get a further diagnosis, or, what's going on. Like ADHD is just one lens of neurospiciness. Like there's a lot of neurospicy. And like at the end of the day, we're all a little bit spicy.
I
I
know.
mean, I don't necessarily mean it like ADHD mean. I just mean we're all a little spicy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're all our own individuals, and I love that, and I'm here for that. Having said that, Victoria, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise and your journey and your experience, as well as resources con the Making Líder Moves comunidad. We really appreciate you getting vulnerable, sharing your story, and helping us destigmatize these physical and mental challenges that we face with our disorders, disabilities, chronic illnesses. To the women of color community. I know you are paving the way to be comfortable with speaking on on mental and physical well-being. How can our líderes follow you and keep up contigo?
Thank you. So, you can follow me. My website for my business is Lilac and Aspen. It's a nod to my two homes, New Hampshire and Colorado.
Love it.
Lilacaspen.com. I also have an Instagram, Lilac and Aspen is the handle. I'm on LinkedIn, Victoria Carrington. And if you really want some of the fun adventures of my life and the real the real chisme, there is my personal TikTok and Instagram handle of at Wild and Lee, Lee. So
Love it. Love it. Victoria, mi amiga, thank you again so much for sharing tu tiempo y tu knowledge. I know we haven't met in person yet, but girl, that shit's gonna change real quick. Manifesting it.
yeah,
For all of those who have joined, thank you so much for listening as well as viewing. I hope you were able to receive the gems of knowledge that were dropped in today's episode. Don't forget to leave us a review, cinco estrellitas, por favor, and join the online community Making Leader Moves on Facebook as well as Instagram. If you have a question, please send it our way to makingleadermoves@gmail.com. Gracias once again, and I will catch you on the next episodio. Abrazos, besos, y cariño familia. Ciao. Till the next one.
adios, muchas gracias.